Welcome, everyone. I'm Robyn Merrick, Vice President for External Affairs for the Southern University System. On behalf of Louisiana Public Broadcasting and Indie Lens Pop-Up, we would like to thank you for joining us for this virtual preview screening of Try Harder, the acclaimed documentary from filmmaker Debbie Lum that explores the pressures of the college applications process through the eyes of the students featured in the film. Indie Lens Pop-Up is about sparking conversations and getting to know our community better. You can help us do just that by asking our panelists questions in the chat box. And before the end of the conversation, by clicking the orange Take the Survey button on your screen. One survey taker will win a year's membership to LPB Passport, the online streaming service of the best of PBS. And another will win a $50 gift card. Now I'd like to introduce to you our distinguished panelists joining us this evening. First, we have Lou Nakasako. He's the producer and cinematographer for Try Harder. Lou was a camera assistant on Crip Camp, which premiered at the 2020 Sundance Film Festival, and HBO's We Are the Dream, the Kids of Oakland MLK Oratorical Fest. He was an assistant director on Freeland and co-editor of Michael Siv's Days of Justice, which aired on PBS's Doc World in 2019. His short narrative film Brothers won UCLA's award for Best Undergraduate Screenplay and subsequently played at numerous film festivals. He has a Bachelor of Arts from the UCLA School of Theater, Film, and Television. Dr. Arielle Mitchell is owner and director of counseling for Cognitive Solutions and is also assistant professor of counseling at Xavier University of Louisiana. Arielle earned a Ph.D. in counselor education and research, a master's degree in marriage and family therapy, and a bachelor's degree of science in psychology. She is a licensed professional counselor supervisor, licensed marriage and family therapist, a registered play therapist supervisor, and certified school counselor. Arielle is also the immediate past president of the Louisiana School Counseling Association. Lucas Spiefogel is executive director of the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition. Lucas graduated with a bachelor's in history from Yale University. He is the author of The College Playbook, a guide to the college and financial aid application processes. His awards include the John W. Barton Award for Excellence in Nonprofit Management and Blue Cross Blue Shield of Louisiana's Foundation's Angel Award. Got that right. Under his leadership, BRIC has grown from supporting 50 high school students in 2012 to serving at least 360 high schoolers and almost 600 alumni in 2022. Welcome to all of our panelists this evening. As a reminder to our audience, we're going to ask that you type your questions for our panelists if you have any questions in the OV chat box. We'll be checking the chat box throughout the evening to check your questions and see if we can get them all in during our brief conversation. So we're going to start first with Lou. This has been amazing what we've seen so far, and we really appreciate that you're joining us tonight. As producer and cinematographer for Try Harder, you were able to capture the hopes and dreams and also the anxieties and disappointments experienced by the students in the film that we've just seen. What was the filmmaking experience like for you, witnessing and capturing these highs and lows of the students?
Well, thanks for having me. I'd say the first analogy that I always kind of use in terms of my experience producing and shooting this film is that it's actually a little bit like 21 Jump Street, you know what I mean? Because I'm Asian and I look real young. So I was able to just kind of infiltrate myself with the students and their lives, right? And I dress like a college kid. This is the most well-dressed I've been since COVID. So basically the whole thing, and the reason why I bring up 21 Jump Street is because when I went back, I was actually so shocked by the whole culture surrounding college admissions, right? Because I only had graduated from high school 10 years prior to when we actually started filming. And what was crazy was just how seriously and how this whole college journey had basically become kind of a full-time job for these students, right? And, you know, because I had gotten to be pretty close to them, you kind of got to experience, you know, the highs and lows that maybe we adults experience if we're kind of in a competitive environment, right? So you would always try to remind the kids like, hey, you know, you're just in high school, like things are, you know, things change, right? But what was interesting to see is that a lot of times those words could only go so far. They were so caught up with where they were going to go and how they were going to get there. And the one thing that, you know, I hope that they kind of remind themselves now that they're adults is that, you know, it's important to figure out where you're going and what you're doing, but it's also important to remember who you are, right? And in high school, that's a pretty pivotal time to kind of explore that side of yourself. So hopefully they can kind of do that as they, you know, age into adulthood.
Yeah, this has been great. I especially enjoyed just really getting to know these students and feeling as though I know them, going through this journey with them. And it's been, like you said, the ups and downs and the highs and lows of it all. So Arielle, speaking of that, we really see the role that the family dynamic plays with these students. Parents can be an additional support, but in some cases, as we saw with Rachel, they can be another pressure point for students, or in other cases, absent altogether in the students' lives, as we saw as well. So as a counseling professional, share with us your best advice that you give to students and families going through the college applications process.
Yes, thank you for inviting me here today. I think one of the most important things for families and students to remember is as they're going through this process, there are kind of three things that I share with them. Number one is to plan early, right? Start discussing your post-secondary options early on so that it doesn't become a heavy stressor later on in the senior year or at the end of the junior year, and you are now fighting against everything and saying, okay, I have to make a decision. Have those conversations early. The second thing is to keep a record. When you're having those conversations early, you can also just kind of keep record of everything you've done, your volunteer work, jobs, odds and ends, things that you've engaged in that will assist you in completing your college applications, right? That lessens the stress also when you don't have to sit down and think about what have I done over the last 4 years to put on this application. And then another thing is I kind of break up applications into these three areas, right? You want to apply to your dream school, a competitive school, and then your guaranteed school. The goal is that you look at, okay, I dream of going to this university or this institution, but it may be difficult, whether that's because of academics, whether that's because of finances, geographic locations. There are a lot of different reasons that certain universities become difficult for students. But then you have schools that are competitive and you're saying, okay, I think I can make this one work. It's a competitive university, so I would be happy with it. And then you have guaranteed universities that some place their admissions requirements online, and it's easy for you to look at it. You say, okay, check, check, check. I meet all of these elements, so I know I'm going to get into this university. It's a part of playing the odds, so to speak, right? But you want to have some successes in those odds, and that's why the guaranteed universities are so important. And one thing that I share with parents that is extremely important is you've watched your child over these 4 years. You've seen them put in the work. At the point that they are now submitting college applications, your job is to praise the effort and not the outcome.
Ah, great.
That is really important.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. In working here at a university in Louisiana, we've got campuses across the state, and I just hadn't thought about that, praising the effort that's been put forth versus the outcome. Very salient point that I think we would want to underscore in all of this, especially as we watch the pressures in this program that I think, you know, had I not seen this program, probably would not have quite felt about this process the way that we have after seeing it tonight. So thank you for that. Lucas, I'm coming to you next. The Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, great work that you guys are doing. I've been admiring your work for years. You guys are dedicated to helping ensure higher education is accessible for marginalized students. As we saw in the program, there were several students in that would fit that criteria. So you and your team are very involved in guiding students through the college application process to help them establish the long-term economic mobility that so many families want. Talk to us about that and the mission of BRIC.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. And Lou, congratulations on a great film. This is also the best dressed that I've been since the pandemic started. And that's counting the fact that I'm wearing basketball shorts right now. So yeah, so the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, or BRIC, is an after-school program that supports high school students in the greater Baton Rouge area to excel in their high school courses and ultimately enter a 2 or 4 year college with a viable payment plan, prepared to also excel at that level. And so you can think of BRIC's work broadly in 2 buckets. One of them is self-regulated learning. And so we work with our 9th through 11th graders, basically trying to teach them how to be expert learners, because not only is that critical in their high school courses and on the ACT, but even more so when they get to college. So one huge part about BRIC is students being able to drive their own learning. And then of course, the second major bucket is college access and persistence. So students, of course, doing what they need to do throughout high school to best position themselves, actually executing the college application process. And then most importantly, once they get to college, being able to persist. Because I think in many cases, we focus a little bit too much on the entry and not as much on the persistence and the graduation. And I think that we really need to orient our success when it comes to college access, especially when it comes to underrepresented students, around their completion rates, and then longer term, their ability to convert that degree into economic opportunity. Because at the end of the day, and especially for low SES students, college is meant to be a vehicle. It is an intrinsically valuable experience in and of itself, but it's also a vehicle primarily for a better life, for greater access to your personal and professional dreams. And so we really want to make sure that students are entering college with a viable plan financially, and that they're able to ultimately leverage their degree to get the kind of career track job that's going to lead to their future aspirations.
And thanks, Lucas. I really appreciate you mentioning the difference between recruiting and admitting students versus the retention aspect of that, and how important that is, because our recruitment numbers and our admissions numbers are really high. And then you look across the spectrum and like, well, did we retain everyone? And did we retain them all the way through the process, or just what? So that's a really critical aspect of this as well. So thank you for that. So Lou, I'm coming back. As our cinematographer here, it's really great how you put all of this together. So as Try Harder is premiered throughout the United States by PBS member stations, just like LPB, are there some common threads that you're seeing or hearing from the audiences across the country?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the main one that sticks out is just kind of how universal this struggle is, right? So obviously we told this story from a very specific Asian American lens, and but I think the fact that we have a white kid and an African American girl in it actually shows just how universal it is. And the thing is that I think I mentioned with your previous question, it was that it was a lot easier to get into college when I was applying, right? Like nowadays, like one of the things in that ending montage where you see the kid who is disappointed about going to UC Santa Cruz, like that kid has a 4.0 or has a 4.2. And if UC Santa Cruz is kind of considered a lower tier UC by California students, I mean, it just kind of shows you how high the bar has gotten, at least in California, right? And I'm kind of answering the question from a California specific lens, sure. But that was probably the most common thread. It's just, one, it's gotten so difficult, and two, like Arielle said, you kind of have to have all that information with you when you're applying, because if you don't, you're already behind the 8 ball. And I'm a little bit worried about what that does to kids. I think kids should be involved in a variety of things. I don't think that college should necessarily be the only thing that they're focused on. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of what I would say about it.
Although I got to tell you, having started college more than 35 years ago, I felt like a slacker compared to these kids. I mean, they indeed were, very far more focused than me and my classmates were at that age, some 30 plus years ago. So yeah, indeed, things have definitely changed. So Arielle, coming back to you, as the film continues, we see some of the students feeling deflated, as we saw after so much hard work, the 4.0s and the 4.2s, and it doesn't really result in their desired outcome. So we have one student, Alvin in particular, says, "I'm not good enough." So what do you think that students have enough, do you think rather that students have enough mental health resources in school to support this? And if not, what support systems would you like to see put in place?
So the short answer to that is no, right? I don't think there are enough support systems put in place for students, and especially students that are similar to what we saw in this film. Those students are typically seen as, gifted, exceptional, self-sufficient, talented, right? And so in those highly competitive academic environments, those students may be all of those things, but they're also still dealing with the general concerns of growing up and developing in society. And so you see that the amount of pressure that they can be under, whether it's the students putting themselves under pressure or even the parents placing that on them, it can be crippling. And so I really feel that schools would benefit from having a curriculum in place to help these high performing students, especially, understand more about self-efficacy and teaching them really how to value themselves outside of academic performance, right? One of the other things that would be necessary for them is building resilience. So most times clinically, people focus on resilience as a response to trauma, right? But resilience in itself is a skill that is beneficial for any outcome-based experience. When you're dealing with situations where we're placing emphasis on specific outcomes, being resilient can help you bounce back from an undesired outcome. And it's a skill that I think we really should look at teaching within our school systems, especially in these high performing schools where we are so competitive academically and it's outcome based.
Resilience may not be a bad thing just in light of all that we've dealt with in the last few years, especially here in Louisiana, not just the pandemic, but the natural disasters that have come our way. We use that term loosely, resilience, but it can really be applicable across the board in some really great ways. And I don't think we teach it. I think we just get out there and do it. So great point as well. Thank you for that. Lucas, what needs to change, in your opinion, in the education system, and are the college admissions process for Louisiana students to create more supportive environments?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think that to begin with, access to high quality public education is, of course, the first major step to being able to succeed in the college application process. And so the variance that we see there and the gaps that we see there along lines of socioeconomic status, along lines of race, are obviously what is perpetuating, systemic inequality in our country, which is the tradition of our country. And so, we don't have enough time here to get into the mechanics of public education. But it's important to note that although, again, I really love the film, Lou, I think to understand what students are going through in the college process is, taking the full scope of high school students' experiences. In this film, we saw a highly pressurized environment where the expectation was not only to go to college, but to go to a top tier college. The students that we work with at BRIC, some of them can certainly relate to that. Some of them are attending schools where the academic pressures are high, and there's even an element of cutthroat competition. But a lot of our students, that isn't necessarily the case. A lot of our students are facing different kinds of challenges. For example, they're trying to balance their high school grades and applying to college with perhaps supporting their families. In some cases, the students that BRIC works with face pressure if they go to college from maybe family members or community members who may not have. And so I think in looking at it, we need to look at it holistically. But to the question specifically about kind of what makes the college admissions process more equitable, for one, it's deprioritizing certain elements that have been traditionally very exclusive. So one example is the ACT. What you're seeing over the last decade, and certainly the momentum is increasing for the deprioritization of the ACT, because we're realizing that ACT scores are really correlated with income more than anything else. And so it's probably not happening fast enough, but colleges are very slowly adopting forms of or elements that they'll accept in the admissions process that are a little bit more holistic and responsive to a diverse array of student experiences. Of course, we need to increase counseling in schools. I think that folks would be surprised that the average public school American counselor to student ratio is 1 to about 450. Not sure any of us could remember 450 names, much less guide that many students through a really intensive process. So I know that there's so much more to say about this, but I would just wrap it up by saying there's a lot more robust supports that need to be put in some of our most under-resourced public schools, which isn't necessarily what was reflected in the film, although the film reflected some really, really key issues, particularly mental health and its relationship to the college process.
Indeed. Thank you, Lucas. Lou, I'm curious, are you still in touch with any of the students featured in the film, and can you share any updates about them with us?
Sure, yeah. So Rachel, she's working in a lab at UCSF, so she's kind of using that to kind of improve her chances of going to medical school. So that's eventually what she wants to do. I think Sophia is working for an environmental startup. Alvin is actually driving an EMT van. He's working for the EMT, because I think that's also another job that kind of helps you get into medical school and whatnot. Shay actually did something pretty cool. He's a senior at Stanford now, but during COVID, he actually traveled from city to city because it was all remote learning. So him and his friends were all like traveling along the West Coast, kind of staying at different places and learning that way. And Ian is actually, he's a teacher now in Atlanta, Georgia. Yeah.
Incredible. Yeah, that's really incredible to hear those stories. Just curious also, is Alvin still dancing?
I think so. The other thing you should know about Alvin too is that I think, and this is just a rumor, but I think his mom is actually still picking him up and dropping him off to work every day.
Oh, interesting. That is an interesting little fact. But yeah, his mom was, I'm glad she was featured so heavily, and the parents that were featured to help tell the story of what was going on with the students. So thank you for that. We're coming up on our time, but I did want to try to, before we shut down, ask one last question for all of our panelists, and that is, what advice would you give to your high school self? That is 17-year-old Lou, 17-year-old Arielle, 17-year-old Lucas. And I'll start with you, Arielle, first. Your 17-year-old self, what advice would you give her?
I think the advice that I would tell myself is to focus on the journey of life and not the destination.
The journey and not the destination.
Yeah, all about the journey. I think people always say, oh, I'll be happy when. And then you're like, when what? And you get there and then you're like, well, what's next? Life is about the journey. And I think we just have to grapple with what that means for us, live intentionally, and move forward with where we're going and where we're supposed to be. So I would definitely tell myself that. Enjoy the journey. Don't be so devastatingly focused on the destination.
Got it. And Lucas, what are you telling your 17-year-old self?
So I'm going to cheat a little bit on this question, and I'm going to make a shameless plug to all of the 17-year-olds out there who are watching. Okay. My advice is, if you are looking for support in the college application process, if you are looking for an incredible community of young people, please join us at the Baton Rouge Youth Coalition, and you can learn more at thebryc.org, THEBRYC.org.
No problem with the shameless plugs and commercial break there. That's a good thing. Thank you for that, Lucas. And Lou, I was deliberately saving you for last on this question because you seem like a 17-year-old. Like you said, you were blending in with the kids as you were making this film. So what would you tell? And we got a chance to see your picture. I think that was your high school graduation picture.
Oh, yeah.
What would you tell yourself?
I think it's going to be pretty similar to Arielle. I think, just process. I'm a big process person. So my whole thing is focus on the process and not the result. And the thing is try to explore all the different things that you're kind of interested in. You don't have to know exactly what you want to do and how you want to do it by the time you're 16 or 17. That's kind of ridiculous. So, that's pretty much what I would say.
That is a lot of pressure. I think I may have changed 6 or 7 times from 16 to now about what you want to do in life. So good points. Thank you. Thank you to our panelists for all of your answers to our questions. And even that last question, we really appreciate it. And I do know that this program this evening is definitely going to serve as a resource for us, and especially as we speak to that universal struggle that you talked about, Lou, that you're seeing across the country. So we want to let you know that Try Harder will premiere on Independent Lens on LPB on Monday, May 2nd at 9 p.m. So mark your calendars. But before we go, we invite you to share your feedback and your thoughts with us and your fellow audience members by participating in our interactive survey. You can go to it by clicking the orange Take the Survey button on your screen or the survey link in the chat box. Your feedback helps us understand how we can improve our Indie Lens pop-up events. Everyone who completes a survey is entered into a raffle for a chance to win a $50 gift card or an LPB Passport membership. So in addition to thanking you all and our wonderful panelists, LPB would like to extend a special thank you to our national partners who helped to make this evening possible. That's Independent Lens, Independent Television Service, Center for Asian American Media, PBS, and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Try Harder is made possible with the generous support of Independent Television Service, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, PBS, Acton Family Giving, MacArthur Foundation, Winecott Foundation, and the National Endowment for the Arts. And in case you missed any part of this conversation, you may view it tomorrow at lpb.org/try harder. That's lpb.org/try harder. So we hope that you will visit it again, just in case you missed something or in case you want to just see it again. So thank you again, everyone, for joining us. I'm Robyn, Merrick, and wishing you all a very good night.